Well, hi, we were talking yesterday about dealing with discouragement. We all deal with discouragement, and even people in the Bible dealt with it. We were talking about Elijah, remember him, and the showdown that he had on top of Mount Carmel. I've been there twice now, and it's an amazing place. In fact, it's right by the Sea of Galilee. And we talked yesterday about the showdown between the prophets of Baal, over 400, and how they tried to call down fire and nothing happened. And then Elijah, he builds his altar, he puts his sacrifice on it, but he makes it challenging. They get water and they just douse this offering with water, and then he prays this little prayer. And the fire of God falls from heaven and it just licks up the whole thing. And all of a sudden this revival breaks out. And people are going, Jehovah, He's God, He's God. Now, if you take a look at this, you would say that Elijah is now famous. He'd never be wanting for another preaching engagement for the rest of his life. I mean, every synagogue in Israel is going to be asking him to come and preach and hold these week-long revivals. And there's going to be these big love offerings. And everything's going to be falling into place. And you would have thought Elijah would be on the top. But that's not what happened. Elijah got discouraged. And you'd probably say, okay, after a long time. No, it was within a matter of hours. He got discouraged, very discouraged. And we pick it up in 1 Kings chapter 19. It says, and Ahab told Jezebel all that Elijah had done, and with all how he had slain all the prophets with the sword. Now, here's Ahab, the king of Israel. Jezebel, that's his wicked wife. And Ahab comes in and he says, well, this is kind of neat. He's too dopey to realize he just lost all his prophets. But Jezebel realized what had been done here, and she's infuriated. And in verse 2, the Bible says, then Jezebel sent a messenger unto Elijah, saying, so let the gods do to me and more also, if I make not thy life as the life of one of them by tomorrow about this time. Now, at this point, Elijah should have laughed. When he got that message, he should have doubled over and laughed. I mean, he could have just called down fire from heaven if he wanted on her head, and done away with her. We find out later in this book here that if you read on, he can still do it. He can still call down the fire. And in fact, you read that there's this group of 50 soldiers, and Elijah's calling down fire on them. So it's something he can do. So why does he get shook when one sassy old windbag threatens to kill him? Why does he run from her? But notice in verse 3 of that chapter, it says, and when he saw that, he arose and went for his life. And he came to Beersheba, which belongeth to Judah, and he left a servant there. But he himself went a day's journey into the wilderness, and came and sat down under a juniper tree. And he requested for himself that he might die, and said, it is enough now, O Lord, take away my life, for I am not better than my fathers. Wow. Can you just see him here? Is this really Elijah? The guy who appears with Moses in the New Testament? The guy who never dies? The guy who's sitting in heaven right now, who's probably one of the witnesses in the book of the Revelation, one of the two guys that's going to be coming back during the tribulation? Yeah, that's Elijah. You know what? Apparently, he's as human as you're human and as I'm human, and he's as prone to discouragement as we are. It really doesn't matter. You look through the pages of the Bible and you find the greatest of the greats, and they're still prone to discouragement. They're still susceptible to this thing that we call discouragement. Let's look at another man in the Bible. In Job chapter 3, we find another outstanding saint in the Bible who's going through discouragement. He's singing the blues. He's calling the bummed hotline. And he's down in the dumps here, and you say, well, what brought it on? Fact of the matter is he had a pretty good reason. He just lost all his wealth. He just lost all of his employees. He just lost all of his livestock. And on top of that, he lost all 10 of his children. That would discourage anybody. And we find here that Job is going through it. And notice here in Job 3 and verse number 1, the Bible says, after this opened Job his mouth and cursed his day. In other words, the day he was born. And Job spake and said, let the day perish wherein I was born, and the night in which it was said, there is a man-child conceived. Let that day be darkness. Let not God regard it from above. Neither let the light shine upon it. Let darkness and the shadow of death stain it. Let a cloud dwell upon it. Let the blackness of the day terrify it. You go, wow. Would you say this guy hates the day that he was born? I mean, he's throwing rocks at it in every direction, and he's saying, cursed be that day. He says, I wish I'd have never been born. You ever felt that way? You go on, and in verse 11, Job says, why died I not from the womb? Why did I not give up the ghost when I came out of the belly? Why did the knees prevent me? Or why the breast that I should suck? For now should I have lain still and been quiet. I should have slept. Then had I been at rest. In other words, why was I not stillborn? Why did I have to be born into this world? Can you imagine his despair? Can you imagine his despondency? Can you imagine his discouragement? But the fact of the matter is that, well, Job was human, just like you're human, just like I'm human. And so, yes, he was susceptible to discouragement. But he's not the only one. You look at the New Testament. In fact, you look at the book of Acts, and we look at the third character, the Apostle Paul. Perhaps Paul was one of the greatest Christians in the Bible, or at least maybe one of the three or four best Christians that ever lived. And here's Paul the Apostle. Now, he's ending the career, this great career. He's nearing the end of his ministry, his career, if you want to call it that. And by this point, he's been shipwrecked, he's been stoned to death, he's been beaten with rods, he's been in a number of prisons, been whipped, and he's been betrayed. I mean, all of this has come down on the Apostle Paul. I mean, and day in and day out, he's also living with the burden of all the churches on his back. So here's Paul. And you can add to that, he has people around him all the time. He's training men constantly. He's busy, busy, busy. And by the way, sometimes that can be a reason for discouragement. It just wears us down. We can't get away from it all. And so you find Paul here, he's going through all this. And like the Energizer Bunny, he just keeps on going. But the fact of the matter is, if you read between the lines, he is down. And in Acts 20 and in verse 13, the Bible says, and Luke says, and we went before to ship and sailed to Assos, there intending to take in Paul. For so had he appointed, minding himself to go afoot. And when he met with us at Assos, we took him in and came to Melite. Now, you'd say, Pastor, I don't find any discouragement here. But wait a minute. This is a 20-mile walk, all right? And the boat would have went a lot faster. But Paul decides to walk. You say, why? I think he was feeling some things. He was sorting out some things. He was going through some things. I'm going to show you tomorrow. We're out of time today, but I'm going to show you tomorrow why even the Apostle Paul got discouraged. The point is this. It can happen to me. It can happen to you. It can happen to anybody, even born-again Christians. And so how do we deal with discouragement? Well, I want to share with you tomorrow some ways that we can get victory over it. So for today, I hope you'll have a great day, and I hope you'll join me back here tomorrow. God bless you.
When we asunder part, it gives us inward pain, but we shall still be joined in heart and hope to meet again.